Press Review with Will Hildebrandt. And I'm joined by Will Hildebrandt to take a look at the French papers this morning.
Morning, Shona. So I'd like to begin by talking about this story about these French journalists who were killed in Mali. The French press is, of course, all over this, as they should be. And we're going to begin by looking at Libération, which has the headline, Press Assassinated. And the story focuses on how the brutal killings underscore the struggle to find security in this country. Inside the paper, it profiles the two people who worked for Radio France Internationale. That's Ghislaine Dupont, who colleagues fondly called Gigi. She's known for her big mouth, but also a tenacious reporter. She pushed herself and her colleagues to the best. Her colleague who was also killed with her was Claude Véron. He's a reporter and a sound engineer, and they say he had a meticulous eye for detail. Now, both of these reporters were very experienced in terms of working in dangerous environments in Africa as well. And Radio France Internationale says despite this violent crime, they will not hesitate to return there. That's coming from numerous management, from reporters and other colleagues, and they're saying that there's no hesitation. They will be returning to Mali.
All right, now the French government has said it will ramp up security in the north of the country after the shocking murder, but there are concerns of whether it will be effective or not.
That's right. So on the front page of 20 Minutes, they have the headline, The Reign of Disorder. The concern is that these two journalists, they were abducted in a city that has had French and UN forces for over a year. And Le Croix, the Catholic newspaper, says this is an unending violence in northern Mali. So what we're seeing now are a lot of editorials talking about this unending war. Editorial inside of within Le Croix says, looks at all these difficulties within Kidal in northern Mali and says the French operation has stopped the spread of jihadism, but it's an uneasy calm permeating the country. So there are legislative elections at the end of November. And the paper says, quite frankly, the security forces there, French and international forces, they don't have the strength to ensure there will be peace and calm within Mali. So there's a lot of concern. And on top of that, the West's war against jihadism has made some progress, but at the same time, it's radicalized many people and led to new recruits for jihadists.
All right, now François Hollande has a tough week ahead of him with high unemployment and more job cuts that could be on the way.
That's right. So L'Opinion is running in their paper a story called "The Week of High Stakes." This is people from within banking, manufacturing, the food industry, healthcare. The workforce is basically unhappy. There's a high unemployment throughout the country, and among 8 companies within these different industries, there are over thousands, 5,000, 6,000 jobs, depending on how you count it, threatened by layoffs. And they're saying there are going to be more protests this week. That means more headaches for François Hollande. Now, Opinion says he needs to find a way to loosen his stance, but instead he's only tightening the bolts.
Now, all this follows what were violent protests in Brittany over the weekend.
That's right. So if we look at Le Parisien, we see that there's thousands of food workers and farmers protesting. Now they're being called the bonnets rouges, or the red hats, and they're protesting in Brittany against what is the ecotax. Now that would levy a tax on trucks carrying 3.5 tons of food goods, and they're saying basically they're vulnerable. If these taxes go up, their profits, they have to raise prices, and they are in turn less competitive. So they're worried their livelihood is being threatened. Now, they've destroyed several of these metal barriers you can see on the photo there of the highways that would scan these trucks, and each one of those costs roughly between 500,000 to 1 million euros. Now, different take on this story in Libération, bonnet rouge et gros bonnet, which is essentially the red hats and the big hats. We might think of it as the big wigs in English. Mm-hmm. They're saying the people who are protesting are being manipulated by their bosses. And what this idea of competitivity is basically the bosses are unwilling to take a hit on their profit margin. So they're telling their workers to go out and get into the streets. And a small portion of the left says that basically if the bosses were willing to compromise, then they wouldn't have any of their jobs threatened in the first place.
Thanks, Will Hildebrandt, for that look in the papers. Coming up after the break, we'll have more. We'll also head to Greenland, where the PM is promising to push through plans for a controversial uranium mine aimed to boost the country's economy.